Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the 8th round of the Cyclocross World Cup, which took place in Dendermonde, and with me here to do that is Issam.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's the last of our Christmas races, 11. I double checked it after yesterday's confusion. It's the 11th podcast in 2 weeks' time. I'm quite happy it comes to an end. I can certainly use a bit of the rest, and I also was quite happy that I wasn't in Dendermonde because the weather was atrocious today. Rain. This morning there was also some snow which melted. The course turned into a real mudfest. But in my opinion, the perfect type of mudfest. There was not an excessive amount of running because the course was quite wet. You could still ride through most of the course and the flat straights didn't turn into running like we've seen in previous years here in Dendermonde. So I certainly thought this was probably the best edition of Dendermonde in terms of course conditions we have seen. In the men's race, no real surprises there. We discussed it in yesterday's podcast. Today was the day for Wout van Aert. The course was not as technical as in Gullegem yesterday. In these conditions, he could utilize his power, and he did so in the race. So after starting on the 4th row due to slipping down the UCI ranks, he moved up through the field, took it easy, but about 20 minutes into the race, he hit the front. Emil Verstringen did his best to stick with Van Aert for as long as he could, but ultimately had to accept defeat. Van Aert went on to take his second win of the weekend, with Verstringen taking second. The battle for third place was a bit more interesting. There we saw Toon Aerts take on Joran Wieseuren, but also Michael van Toerenhout was in the mix after an early puncture. Van Toerenhout, however, went too deep, never really connected to that group. He caught Aerts, but by the time he caught Aerts, Wieseuren had already passed and dropped Aerts. It was a second and third place for Crelan Corendon as Wieseuren claimed that final spot on the podium. Issam, no real surprises, I already mentioned it. This is what we discussed yesterday. Van Aert lacks the cross skills at the moment, but he didn't need them today.
You know, the course that we got today was perfect for Wout van Aert, and he did what he had to do. He finished the job. His start wasn't the greatest, but he knew, he took his time. It didn't stress whatsoever, and he was able to just pick his opponents one by one, and there he was at the front, was able to put the pressure just before halfway, and from there on he was able to dominate the race. And he gets a course that with the running, it's so tough, especially with the mud today. It was a hard race. We know that Van Aert, when he is in good condition, he's able to really capitalize the circumstances. And today was a race that suits him, I think, almost perfectly. It was a perfect race for Van Aert, and he was able to do what he had to do, and it was great for him, I think, because this weekend is definitely a great weekend to look back for him. If you look at his last season, it wasn't the best of seasons. It was a lot of downs, and I think for him to start the year this way, it's only a positive, and we're going to see what comes out of it on the road with the preparation that he has chosen to go through, and we will see. But it was obviously for him a great victory, but if we look behind, I mean, Emil Verstringen today was a brave man in a way, because he was the one that tried to follow the wheel of Van Aert the longest, and that is normally, that could have cost him badly on a course like this. But Verstringen had some good legs today, and he was able to hang on for as long as he did. And when he had to let go, he obviously got a setback, but it wasn't as bad as I kind of expected, and maybe the entirety of the field had their moment in a way. And he was able to hang on to second, and I think that that is for him. That was a brave ride, as I said, and it was a very good ride. And Wieseuren was able to get himself in third, which during the race he gave some signs of being a candidate for the podium. But I think going into the later phase of the race, I thought that Toon Aerts would probably be able to finish the job, or Van Toerenhout maybe. But Wieseuren, the moment Van Toerenhout was closing in, Wieseuren thought it's now the moment maybe to show my good legs, and he was able to do so. And I think for both those guys, both Verstringen and Wieseuren, I think it was a great race, and two prospects that are able to finish on the podium behind Van Aert, I think they also will look back on a great day.
I'll circle back to those Crelan Corendon riders in a bit. As you said, it was a mature ride by Verstringen. He didn't go over his limit, but Van Aert was just a class above the rest. You could see in these cable shots, like the long cable which panned alongside, sometimes you got a real good view of the gear Van Aert was pushing. It was normally 1 or 2 gears bigger than Verstringen, and he was just on the power moving through. And that's no surprise, right? We know that he is the best rider in the world on courses like this. You don't know how he would have done against Van der Poel, but if we remember back to the days that both of these riders were here at their primes or in other super, super tough, demanding courses, Van Aert always had the upper hand there. And even if you want to say Van der Poel is better, that's fine for me. He is just a cut above the rest on courses like this. However, I did find it a bit pathetic that in Belgium, after this performance, all of a sudden the debate about should he race the World Championships completely re-sparked, because during the race the commentators were holding this race, so can Van Aert beat the margin of victory that Van der Poel got in Zonhoven, and they were worsening the injury of Van der Poel by the minute at the beginning of the race. It's just precautionary, he didn't fancy the weather. But as Van Aert's gap grew, so did the severity of Van der Poel's injury. And it was at the end of the race, he needed to skip 3 races, rib injury. How will he recover from that? Maybe he won't recover well. Van Aert, should he reconsider and think, well, I can win with the same margin as Van der Poel did, and I didn't need to push as hard as Van der Poel, so does that mean I should target the World Championships? Ultimately, the answer is no, right? He was asked about it after the race, but it's none of his priorities at the moment. He thinks about 2 races, and those races are later this year. They are called the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. Did he care when he could get a free world title in Fayetteville when he dominated that season? No, he didn't. He's not going to care now either. He has 3 world titles. He's perfectly happy with that. He's made his choices, and really, this can't really be any moving factor in that. At least that's how I see it, Issam.
No, I think you're right. And in the end, we're talking about a country in which, they breathe cycling in a way, and they breathe cyclocross as well. That it's their thing in a way, and it's almost a religion. In a way, they see Van Aert as the one that is able to bring up the fight to Van der Poel. And I think that just that thought is something that gives them hope. And the idea that a race like today, you see how Van Aert was racing, you see how he was able to dominate the field. And I think that thought just maybe gives them more reason to believe this story, which we know that Van Aert at the moment is made his program quite clear, and we know that he has his way of preparing for the season. At least this year they want to try it this way, and he's not going to change that. And as you say, you pointed it quite well, when he made a program, that is the program which they will try to follow. And it's not going to be the circumstances that will try and alter the whole situation. They are quite happy with what they are doing, and we will see how that will pay off on the road. But I think that it is a story of hope, trying to stir something up rather than really talking about reality, because the reality is that Van Aert will focus fully on the road, will do his races in Benidorm and Maasmechelen, and from there on it's the full focus on April on the road and the rest of the season, and that's what we have to deal with.
What also plays a role here is that Belgium is hungry for a world title, right? Last year in Tabor, they went home with 0 gold medals, which is not something that happens too often for the biggest country in cyclocross. So this year they're looking for any sort of grip of a gold medal, because in the men U23 category, Tirreno Grosso is heavily favored. In the women's category, they don't have any medal contenders across all 3 races, and they don't really want to load the junior men with pressure, but they will eventually do it because it's their best chance at a gold medal. So I feel that definitely plays a big role here, and that they're hungry and searching for narratives. They're definitely searching for narratives all across the board, because the women's racing, we've covered it a couple of times already. Every single race they zoom in a lot on the Belgians, and they're hoping to find a successor for Kant, who in their eyes is a worthy successor, somebody that can potentially challenge for the world title again in the future. And they need somebody to push that narrative for as well in the men's race, so they're hoping that Van Aert might change his mind, but I think that won't happen, as said. But enough about that. He was the strongest today, and there's no point in comparing, well, what could have happened if Van der Poel was here, what would have happened. Impossible to tell. What is possible to tell is that Verstringen and Wiesure rode a very good race. For Verstringen, this is another course that suits him quite well. He can utilize his power, he has long legs, he's a quite solid runner, and it's kind of what we see in this Christmas period from him. He was up there in Baal on a tough course, he was up there in Gavre on a tough course, and of course it all started with that third place in Namur from coming back from that injury to his hamstring. So he rode very well. And then that battle for third place, Issam, again, kind of circle to Van Toerenhout in a bit. Let's focus on Wiesure and Aerts, really the protagonists there. Aerts went backwards a little bit in the second half of the race, but above all, I think Wiesure really surged forward, and I'm quite confident that Aerts also had a puncture in the penultimate lap, because while his lap before wasn't great either, I feel like that's where he lost the race. It looked like he had a bit of a puncture or a slow puncture there. To me, those lap times were out of sync with what he did. But Wiesure also rode a solid second half of the race. He really kept fighting despite being a bit further back earlier in the race.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was a smart race from Wiesure as well, because I felt that he chose his moment in a way. Of course, he was on the back foot early in the race, but when the moment kind of presented itself, he was able to capitalize on it, and he took that moment with both hands, and he was able to put Toon Aerts under pressure, and Toon Aerts didn't have an answer, and Van Toerenhout was then, I think he was already happy that he joined Aerts, and at that point, his, probably what he was eyeing, the podium spot, was kind of gone, and that changed also a bit the dynamic between Toon Aerts and Michael Van Toerenhout, because I think those two were kind of looking at each other. I'm not saying that they lost the podium there, because I think that in the end, if you look at how Wiesure finished his race, it was going to be a very difficult task to catch back up to him. But I definitely think that it changed the dynamic of the race there for both Aerts and Van Toerenhout, because they were maybe looking a little bit too much to each other, and no wonder in a way, because I think that Aerts at that point thought, well, you catch up to me already, so I think you can finish the job in a way. And Van Toerenhout maybe hoped for more support from Aerts, but in the end it didn't matter, because I think that Wiesure, one of those races in which he showed that he's a class rider, he's a big talent, he's someone to remember, a name to remember, and a real cyclocross rider in a way. And it's it's great to see that he is able to fulfill his promise in some of these races this year, more than he did last year. And I think that will only be better and better if his career goes the way it does, because I think that both him and Verstringen have been showing themselves in a couple of races this season already, and I think there is only more to come for both those guys.
So I rechecked, and while the Belgian commentators did for a brief moment think that Aerts had a puncture, he didn't go into the pit, so it looked like he blew up a little bit and only refound his legs in the final lap. But definitely somebody who had his race ruined, I would say, by a puncture was Van Toerenhout, because there were a lot of punctures, especially in the final stretch of the lap, kind of when they went across this construction company towards the 180s, which were a run, and then the final straight. That's where a lot of riders punctured. Van Toerenhout had a flat there in the first lap and needed to chase. Without that chase, he almost certainly ends on the podium. I don't know if the lights went out in the final lap or if there was another mechanical. There was some speculation about that, but no final answer on that. But that was unfortunate to see, because I think Van Toerenhout was doing fine here. This is a good course for him. He likes the power section, he likes the running, he has a big engine, and those are the riders that came forward. I mean, Zweig saw these weather conditions and was like, I'm not even starting. He flew to Spain, and he is going to do some training there before the Belgian championships. He just made his decision, right? And I can honestly also respect that if you see this course, and if you know, like Zweig, this is not a condition where you will do well. There have been many races, you're out of the overall in this classification. Why would you bother when there's bigger goals on the horizon? And as said, he cares about 2 races this season. He cares about the Belgian Championships in Zolder next week, and he cares about the World Championships in Louvain. He wants a title and a medal, and at whatever races he will achieve those 2. Of course, it's more obvious that he would take the Belgian title and a medal at the World Championships, but I doubt he will be complaining if it's the other way around. So that was the race of Van Toerenhout, and then Wiesure just consistently came forward. if we look at the entire top 10, I think behind these Belgians, Van Aert, Verstringen, Viseuren, Aerts, Van Toerenhout, we find another group of riders of Ronhaar, Kuhn, Nijs, Mason and Hendricks. Let's start a bit with the Baloise Glowy Lions riders, Issam. Ronhaar was in that mix for the podium early on in the race, then kind of fell backwards, had some back issues again, managed to repack himself, finished 6th in the end. Van der Haar didn't have a good race, he finished 19th, this is a horrible course for him, whereas Nijs had a puncture early on as well, couldn't quite keep up with Van Toerenhout because he had a few other issues, including a crash in the penultimate lap. What's your takeaway on the riders of that team today?
Yeah, they didn't have the grace of races, and they were somewhat compromised. I mean, Ronhaar with his back issues, Nijs with the puncture and the crash, and overall I think it lacked a little bit of feeling. He was getting better and better, but I think after that crash it was just difficult to kind of continue the way he did before. And I think with Ronhaar, I was a bit worried the way he was racing in the opening of the race, because he was really trying to take initiative. I don't know if that is the best thing to do if you already kind of know that you have issues with the back, because it has been something that has been playing for a couple of races now, and he has been even saying that it sometimes it can hurt to the point of him even really feeling the pain and almost having to cry because of the pain. And I think that when you have that, maybe starting a little bit more conservative wouldn't have hurt on a course like this. Of course, I'm no doctor, so I don't know how these things can be avoided and stuff, but I think it would be the most sensible thing in my eyes, at least, to be a little bit more conservative. And I think he took, the initiative was maybe a bit too much there in the opening of the race. So I think overall, if you look at the team, I mean, they have been there, but if you look at how they presented themselves in the beginning of the season and what we kind of thought would happen this season, I think they were at times able to deliver, but it wasn't the greatest of periods for the team, on the men's side at least. And I think that if you look at that, they have been struggling at times, and at times they were able to be up there and to even get the wins. And it has been a bit of an up and down season for the team, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. They have great prospects, and they have to just believe in what they're doing, and it will come at time. But at the moment, it's at least this race wasn't the greatest of races for them, and overall they haven't had the best of races at times. Sometimes it did go better than was expected, and at times they were a bit more disappointing. So a bit of an up and down for Baloise Glowy Lions.
The biggest hurt for them is that Ronhaar this season has not been able to consistently deliver. He is the type of rider they rely on for this part of the season because he can deliver on these type of courses. Nijs is a versatile rider, but okay, he's still relatively young, still not super young, but definitely next year he needs to be able to become more consistent, because this year he also had that one period where for a month he didn't deliver at all. He had that consistency, but maybe it's a tiredness kicking in now a bit at the end of this busy period, or it's just also the fact that I still see him make a couple of silly mistakes too often, like that crash today. He can't do anything about that puncture, and that really put him on the back foot early in the race. But like in Baal, that crash after unclipping at the start, that was unnecessary, and that results in him missing the podium. So he needs to smoothen out that a bit. But yeah, really, I think overall the team will be modestly satisfied. And what you said about Ronhaar maybe starting a bit conservatively, I have thought about that. But the tough thing with him is, if he does that, it can also mean that he misses out on a spot that he can achieve, because he's just been inconsistent. Sometimes his back holds and sometimes his fitness holds, and then he's in the mix for the win, like we saw in Herentals. In Namur, had a bad start, needed to chase all race, finishes 4th in the end. In Hulst, he was up there, but then in Zonhoven, Gavra and Besançon, he completely blocks. But he was good again in Baal, finished 2nd. He was decent in Kokzijde. And today he fell back again a bit, but managed to repack himself. So it's a bit complicated because he is such a question mark. It's not like he's consistently falling back after those starts, because sometimes he is able to compete for 2nd or without Van Aert and Van der Poel for the win. So if he immediately accepts my endurance base isn't there this season, I have back issues, then he also gives up effectively on the top placings. So I can see why he doesn't do it, and sometimes that has the consequence it has today, or the consequence it has in Zonhoven, that he completely falls back. And it is a super complicated situation to be in. I don't really know what else he can do, because sometimes it does stick, sometimes it doesn't, and then you're just in this situation where we will be saying 1 week, good race by Van Aert, and the next week we'll say, he was up there, but he blew up, or his back didn't work and he fell back. It's obviously a season for him to forget, so hopefully after this he can take a long rest after Worlds, recover, and then build up on the road again, because he was going to be a stagiaire with Lidl Trek on the road. He has shown some decent potential there, but he had, of course, things go different ways when he had Lyme disease, and then also had that big crash on training in the head of the cross season. Then I think another rider we should talk about here, Issam, is Cameron Mason, 9th place. Honestly, an impressive ride by him. He had so many flats, 3, that at some point his mechanics needed to run to the camper to get extra wheels.
Yeah, that was, I think, a bit of a shame, because I think that the conditions for him, it really suits him, and it gives him an opportunity to get himself back in the race after not really starting well in a way, and he's able to pace him well, great throughout the race. And having those punctures can really cost you, especially, we can kind of guess a little bit where the punctures were, but some of them were at the end of the lap, and then it's quite a ride from there to the box to change bikes. So that can compromise big time in a way in terms of your pace and the racing overall, and it will cost you some energy as well. So yeah, it's not the greatest of circumstances, and those are the things that also play a role in cyclocross, and a bit of a shame. I think that if it wasn't for that, he was surely going to be finishing up a little bit higher, maybe potentially fighting for top 5, who knows, but that is also part of the sport. It's not always going to be great. You're not always going to have a race without any incidents, and punctures are part of it, and unfortunately part of it, and that's also cyclocross in a way.
There were too many punctures today. I don't know what caused them. There was no explanation for it, despite some searching between the races, but it seemed to me that, again, I said it before, around this section, towards the end of the lap, after they went past the construction company that's located there, they went through these super deep puddles of water. I guess that's like the prime location where they could have flatted, and hopefully that's something that gets sorted out for next year. It's not really something we've seen that often here in Dendermonde, but there were way too many punctures today. Also in the women's race at the end, Pieterse flatting twice, Van Empel flatting twice in the final 2 laps. That's something that needs to be sorted out, because while punctures are an inevitable part of cyclocross, they don't need to be as influential as today. A few mentions before we go to the women's race. Mees Hendricks solid 10th place. He's qualified for the World Championships. He already did that a bit earlier, but he was on the bubble last year, and this year he's made the Dutch selection criteria. Iserbeet, not a great race for him, not his conditions at all. Let's see what he can do next week at the Belgian Championships, and I think that is kind of it what I have to say about the men's race. So that means we can go to the women's race. Here we saw, for a change actually, a very good start by Lucinda Brandt. She was up there in the first lap, opening a small gap. But Pieterse and Zoe Backset came back in the second lap. And then it was Pieterse who briefly took the lead, put Brandt under pressure, opened the gap, but Brandt managed to come back. She took over from Pieterse. When Pieterse flatted, Brandt rode away and went into the distance, taking victory. Pieterse was eventually caught by Van Empel, but in the final lap, Van Empel punctured. In the penultimate lap, she also punctured, and those 2 punctures put an end to Van Empel's quest for second place. Pieterse finished second on a flat tire, ahead of Van Empel, who also finished on a flat tire. Issam, we said it yesterday, Van Empel with good starts might be unbeatable, and I think today we got a mini display of that. And it was quite funny to hear that after the race she said, the training doesn't make any sense. I should be at the worst I have felt, and I feel quite good at the end. And despite feeling tired, the results are here. I end the Christmas period 10 races with 2 wins.
Yeah, I think we have seen it all. I mean, Brandt starting well was a surprise. Even, Sven Nys was somewhat surprised when he was interviewed during the race. And I think that today definitely, the conditions were something that Brandt likes, and something that Brandt can flourish in a way, and she can put the power down and really use that in a way. But as you say, I think normally a human being would struggle at this point, really be hoping for that plane ticket to Spain and have the training camp there. But not Brandt. Brandt, I guess, is growing and is even getting better and better. But today was a great ride from her side. I think she was able to really pace herself well, got into a rhythm. Was kind of helped with the puncture of Pietersen, but I think it was inevitable for Brandt to put Pietersen under pressure, open the gap there. I think that Pietersen she paced herself also quite well. But I think that for Pietersen, it was just, we were going to a phase in the race in which she was going to struggle a little bit, I felt. And Brandt was just growing into the race. And I think that was somewhat visible, that even after the puncture, which costs you energy, of course, Brandt was able to, really put the power down and kind of break away from Pietersen. And Pietersen was then in the end not able to get back. And yeah, in terms of punctures, it was not great on the women's side as well. For Van Empel, yeah, it was a bit of a struggle at the start, and then you were kind of hoping or waiting in a way for somewhat comeback. When is it coming? When will Van Empel kind of pick up the riders in front of her? And it took some time, and eventually it came through. And at a certain point, it was at a rate in which at least I was thinking, if she continues like this, she's maybe even able to get close to Brandt. But then at a certain point, you just kind of saw that it was slowing down a little bit. And in the end, I think that the puncture didn't help Van Empel in a way to get second. But, they all went through a lot in a way. And I think that in the end, it was somewhat of a fair result that Brandt was the winner, and Pietersen was able to take second in front of Van Empel. I think that neither three of them will complain about the results, because at the end of it, you can look back and say that it was somewhat of a fair podium.
Well, Brandt definitely deserved the win today. I do think that Pietersen, despite not finding a course that suits her very well, could have done better today. A key section on this course was the second pit. In the first lap, Backstedt went into that pit and she took a line all the way on the right of the course, that means the left of the screen, super close to all the mechanics. There was quite a lot of green there, and even when it became muddy, it was a lot more firm. It was more packed, making it a lot quicker to ride there. Backstedt took that line and gained some 7 seconds despite a bike change on the riders who were ahead of her, and those were Pietersen and Brandt. They were outside of the pits. Pietersen did not consistently change in the pits, nor did she take that line. This is something that I don't really blame her for. I don't really know how she should have seen it, apart from maybe recognize it during the recon. But she should have definitely been coached to change in the second pit. She was often changing in the slower first pit. And I think at some point she was also in that second pit, just driving in the middle of the path, which was a lot slower than where the others were changing bikes. With better coaching, she could have perhaps contended a bit longer. Again, I don't think it would have made a difference, but I thought it was interesting to notice that Pietersen didn't quite get that line right all race. That puncture in the middle of the race also hurt her, because she lost the connection with Brandt. She definitely blew up her legs a little bit there. She tried to make the gesture towards the pits, hey, I'm flat, but it wasn't picked up by the camera. They only showed it in the slow motion after she changed bikes. That hurt her. And then for Van Empel, yeah, as you said, we were waiting for her to kick into gear. That eventually happened. It's not a great outing by her. I would have thought she would do better on this course. She is quite powerful. The running of Van Empel is quite good. But as we already saw in Koksijde, I feel the form or the freshness isn't quite there for Van Empel at the moment. And you come to the point of freshness, right? So Spain, Spain, Spain. You said you were probably hoping for that plane ticket to Spain if you're Brandt, but she also is getting that, right? So she's going to Spain, she's going to train. She still hopes that she can/is allowed to race nationals. But Svenijs, the team manager during the race, said, nah, Brandt is not racing, she needs to rest, she needs to train for those world championships if we want to make a big goal out of that. Van Empel is taking the same approach, and honestly, we don't know what Alvarado is doing. She didn't finish this race. These conditions are not really something for her, despite her victory here last year. But also for her, you can conclude that the last couple of races have not been exactly what you'd hoped for it. Where at the beginning we were like, maybe it's Alvarado and Van Empel. The moral victors at the moment are probably Pieterse and Brandt.
Yeah, I think you can definitely conclude with that, because the way Pieterse entered this season, I was a bit, I wouldn't say skeptical, but I didn't really see a moment in which Pieterse could grow in this period. But with the win in Kokzijde and being able to battle here as well for victory for a period of time, and at the end finishing in second, but being among the best, I think that is that is something you take with you. And that switch in a way compared to how she entered, and it wasn't bad before, but it just felt that at that point mistakes were there, and the last part of the race at times she struggled a little bit. And you could maybe make that case today despite the circumstances, but still she was up there and she was able to battle for victory. And I think that is, if you look at it, it's just a swing in a way. And mentally is obviously just going to be a bonus. You're going into that training camp, you should not really, there's not going to be any form of reset. You're basically going into that training camp more motivated than ever. And the same goes for Brandt, because I think if you look at the sequence of races and how she has been doing, it's confusing in a way, and it's hard to analyze because it's against a lot of logic in a way. And Brandt has been defying logic in a couple of these races in quite some areas. It's incredible in a way, the way she has been riding the last couple of weeks. And to be honest, this season overall has been a very good season for Brandt. At times, she struggled a little bit to pick her moments, but she has really been growing into the season. And when she gets an opportunity, she goes for it, even if it's a small one. So, yeah, and for Van Empel, I think that for her, what could have been a very good period, it didn't really come out. That's obviously mentally is not going to be great. And we'll see how she will return now from the training camp and how that will go. And the last couple of races before the Worlds, that's just now where the focus will be, because she will not do the Nationals. Brandt maybe will, maybe not. I had to laugh a little bit when Nijs was completely contradicting in a way what Brandt was saying. But yeah, it's going to be interesting now, the kind of trajectory towards the Worlds, what the riders will do, the races that they will pick, and how they will perform in those races. And, we shouldn't be jumping from conclusion to conclusion each race, because it can be different from, what did they do in the training camp, what was the intensity of the training, and that will all kind of play out, and we'll just see how it will go. And, up to the Worlds, it's going to be an interesting battle and timeline, and we are all for it.
It's an intriguing phase in the women's season, because it's gone back and forth a couple of times, with Van Empel giving us the impression that she was back for real, but then not actually being back for real. And I don't think I need to repeat what I said a few podcasts ago, but every time that Van Empel gave us the impression, like, I'm back at my best, whether that was the Kortrijk Antwerp weekend, or if it was in Herentals, or if it was in Gavere, it definitely seems like she has had a bit of a setback now. Ultimately, I think she will bounce back from this, and we will see her in good form in Benidorm. The last couple of years, she had nice battles there with Pieterse. I expect something similar. She'll be in the mix for the world title, but this year she'll probably be pushed more to her limits than in the past few years. Let's look at the entire top 10, because behind Brandt, Pieterse and Van Empel, we find 4th place for Manon Bakker. Very impressive ride for her. It's probably her best result of the season on what is the best course of the season in these conditions for her. Zoe Backstedt was 5th, didn't quite have the leg she had yesterday. Inge van der Heijden came in on a flat tire for 6th ahead of Leonie Bentveld. 8th place went to Marion Norberg-Ribeirol, 9th to Sanne Kant and 10th to Denise Betsema. Anybody you want to pick out here, Issam?
I would like to start with Bakker in a way, because I think that Bakker has had a season in which we were kind of waiting for good results, but they didn't really come in a way. And I think it's a bit of a shame, because we know that in these type of conditions she's definitely able to take that to her advantage and ride a good result. And thankfully today was a day in which she was able to capitalize on, and I think that was great to see, and is also a big positive for her. I think arguably maybe her best race of the season in a way. she was able to show herself, and I think that is also in a way it could be the small things that could change a season, and I think that it will help Bakker in a way towards the end of a season. It motivates you. These small results can change the momentum in a way, and I think that it was great that Bakker was able to do so. It is someone that we know in these type of circumstances can be very good, but overall is also a cyclocross rider with a lot of talent. But we haven't really seen it from her, and to be honest, a day in which we had. So I think that was great to see, and we if we get these type of conditions in Liévin, which I don't know how realistic that is, but it could be. I think that she definitely can eye a very good result there. I'm not talking about podium, but I think that a top 5 is maybe could potentially be in the book. So I think for her it's just good that she was able to pull it off, and we will see where that will take her in the rest of the season.
Interesting, because for Bakker it's definitely not been the season she had hoped for. She started super early with those points in the USCX series where she didn't quite hit form. She didn't take any wins against Hélène Clauzel, which is a respectable opponent, but she also had a hard time in the earlier races with the likes of Rochette and McGill and Mani. But she grew a bit into the season, but never hit the form that we saw her hit last year. Last year, she needed to prove herself. Her contract was on the line. She took that win in the Val di Sole World Cup. She had a couple of good outings. I remember she was 5th here in Dendermonde. She was way up there in the... that was the race in Niel, super muddy as well. But also in Gullegem with Bakstedt, she was up there. She really had a solid season, and this year she hasn't been able to quite replicate that. It's not been as bad, but it's definitely not the next step or even a continuation of last year, which was what she hoped for. And that brings me to a couple of riders outside of the top 10. So Vash and Schreiber, they didn't really have it. Schreiber, after that win in Hulst, hasn't in fact delivered a single good race. It's gone downhill for her quite rapidly from there. So let's hope that with a bit of freshness she can return to her good form. But another rider I'm curious about is Aniek van Alphen Issam, because she's the same age as Bakker. I needed to think back to when I interviewed her earlier this season on the Kleeberg. She finished 2nd there behind Inger van der Heijden. She should have won that race if it wasn't for a mechanical issue. And she was telling, well, I want to make that step, right? So 2 seasons ago, I won my first classified cyclocross race, first big race is what she said, when I took that win in Boom. After that, it kind of like went downhill in the season and it looked like it was a fluke. Last year I had a good start to the season. I was fighting for a podium and I got a podium in the World Cup of Maasmechelen. I was up there at the European Championships. I was up there in a couple of races, but again, I couldn't continue it through till the end of the season. And this year, it's not necessarily a case of not being able to continue it through to the end of the season. It's never really been there this season.
Greatly put in a way, because I think that is exactly what has happened this season. She never really delivered, and what was a hopeful start never came to fruition. And I think that is a difficult situation to be in, because you're going to ask yourself questions, and it's not great. I mean, it's in a way, not entirely, but because I think that Bakker was at times better than Van Alphen, but I feel that it was, in a way, it was a similar season. Never really having one of those races in which you can hang on to and be like, yeah, this is a good race. From now on, I can really move to the next couple of races, and you just take that with you. I think, Van Alphen for sure didn't have that. And when you see her finish in a way, it's just, you kind of know, like, it's not really where she should be finishing, considering the talent and kind of where we would normally expect her to finish. She hasn't delivered. And that can happen. Riders can have a bad season, but it isn't good, and it's hard to bounce back from in a way as well, because riders at times can really struggle bouncing back from a bad season. We have seen Vorst in a way do it. If you look at her last year and how she has been able to get better results in, bit of a shame with that injury, of course. That's going to take time. But with Van Alphen, she needs one of those races in which she can hang on, and so far she hasn't been able to do so. And time is ticking, and the end of the season is near. And then from there on, it's if you're not able to do it, then you look back at a season which wasn't great, and you have to build up to the next season, and that's just, I think, mentally is going to be quite the battle. So hopefully she gets over it. Hopefully she can get up to a respectable level again, which she's not doing terrible, but you know what I mean. It's not great. It's not fulfilling the promises that she had, and we will see how it will play out in the end. But currently not in a great situation.
I do think it's possible to bounce back from that. There can be reasons that we don't know. For instance, they have had an illness that we don't know about, or something else went wrong in the season preparation. We don't know, but it's definitely not been great, and it cannot be easy to continue like this, because it doesn't really matter what course we are on. It doesn't click for Van Alphen this season. And at least Bakker now has one really good result to pull herself up to. Like, she's 4th in a World Cup. It's a legit result. You can make the case she's been up there this entire season, where Van Alphen has been outside of the top 10. Bakker has at least been in the top 10 for most of the races, which is a bit of a difference. I guess for Van Alphen you can say, well, she's also been there a couple of times in the smaller races, but to me, it definitely feels that I agree with you that Bakker has had a slightly better season. But enough about them. For the rest, I don't know. Alvarado, I think we went over that in the context as well. The freshness isn't there anymore, so it's not really working out for her at the moment. Let's see what comes from it, right? She is going to reconsider now. This is not a course for her, so let's see what comes from it. And I think everyone will be happy that there is a bit of rest coming up now. And honestly, Issam, as I started with, I am quite happy as well. And yeah, I think that will cover it for this episode.
Yeah, it will. I mean, in the morning I saw the snow and I thought this is real Christmas kind of atmosphere going around here, and I was almost missing the Christmas spirit. But no, it has been quite a couple of races that we have covered, and it was great to do so. And now we will look towards the nationals, and from there on, it's as I said several times, the roads to the worlds, and that is going to be the main priority here. So yeah, thank you for having me.
I know what I'm gonna do tomorrow, to be honest. I'm gonna text you what time are we recording, and then oh no, there's no race. I mean, we've been on it for quite a number of races this period. We couldn't permit ourselves to take any breaks due to the start list, so it was a good run, and honestly, I enjoyed most of the races this period, also attending quite a number of them. I will say that next year this period is going to become even more complicated, because we're going to get even more fierce competition for these dates here. Zolder wants to move back in after hosting the Belgian Championships. Not a single race wants to give up these positions. The days of Christmas and New Year's are a bit worse for the race organizers. The World Cup is taking Boxing Day plus the 3 days after, so it's going to be quite complicated with the way that this period is going to be looking next year. But those are worries for when the cross calendar is released, and we can cover them at length. And Issam, again, thank you so much for all your efforts, all your podcast, all your graphic work that you did over the past couple of weeks. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back this week recording a preview for the national championships that are coming up next weekend. Most priority will be on the Belgian championships in Zolder, the Dutch championships in Oosterwijk, but we'll also shine our lights briefly on the Spanish championships in As Pontes, the British championships in Gravesend, and of course some of the other races, for instance in Pontchâteau, Montreux, and in Oderzo. Thanks again for listening. Catch you guys later. Goodbye.